I get tips from people as to where there might be something hiding, and then sometimes I'll just take a day and just go search it.
The last episode of Counting Cars didn't feel like an ending. It aired on a Tuesday night in the spring of 2021. Just another restoration, a 1969 Chevy Nova. It ended with a handshake and a revving engine. When the screen went black, America changed the channel, assuming the show would be back next week. It never came back. No announcement, no farewell episode, no explanation, just silence. And behind that silence was a story that the tabloids got completely wrong. A story of betrayal. Inside his own garage, a deep fake that destroyed an innocent man's reputation. A financial crime that cracked something deep inside the Count. And a comeback that nobody saw coming. Today we are telling the untold story of Danny Koker. The man who built himself twice, lost almost everything, and refused to make a single sound while the world buried him alive. Stay with us, because this story is wilder than any car he ever restored. Before the bar, before the cameras, before the franchise, Danny Koker was a 6'4" piano prodigy from Cleveland, Ohio. Born September 23, 1964, Danny grew up surrounded by two very different kinds of horsepower. The roaring engines of American muscle cars, and the soaring chords of rock and gospel music. His father and uncle were Ford Motors engineers who could tear down an engine blindfolded. His family also ran a Christian singing group, and young Danny traveled with them, fingers dancing across piano keys in churches and revival tents across the Midwest. By age 12, he could play anything from Bach to boogie woogie. By age 16, he could rebuild a carburetor. Most people would pick one lane, musician or mechanic, performer or tradesman. Danny looked at that choice and laughed. He would do everything. After moving to Las Vegas as a young man, he landed a gig hosting a B-grade horror movie show called Saturday Frights at the Movies on a local TV station his family owned. He created a character called Count Cool Rider, a caped, joke-cracking cult hero who became a legend to every weird kid in the Vegas Valley. That was his first taste of television fame, and he loved it. But the cars never left him. In the late, wide 1990s, he opened Count's Customs, a small auto shop specializing in restorations and custom builds. At the same time, he formed a 1970s-style rock band called Count 77 and opened Count's Vamped Rock Bar and Grill, a vampire-themed venue with moody lighting, leather booths, and live music that became a sanctuary for bikers, rockers, and anyone who wanted to hear Deep Purple played loud. He ran the shop during the day, played piano at night, and hosted horror marathons on weekends. By 2008, Danny Koker was a Vegas legend, but only in Vegas. Outside the city limits, almost no one knew his name. Then the phone rang. Rick Harrison's pawn shop called. The producers of Pawn Stars needed a classic car expert who could speak on camera without sounding like a textbook. Someone sent them to Count's Customs. Danny walked onto the set, looked at a rusted 1970 Challenger, and told the owner its exact value down to the last dollar, including the cost of every missing part. The producers were stunned. The audience loved him. Every time Danny appeared, ratings spiked, and the History Channel noticed. When the network executives flew to Las Vegas to offer him his own show, they expected a garage. They found a kingdom. Rows of restored classics gleaming under fluorescent lights. A crew of tattooed, loud-mouthed artists who treated every project like a holy mission. A bar next door where Danny played piano until 2 in the morning. The pitch meeting was short. Give us 6 episodes. We'll call it Counting Cars, you be you. We'll point cameras. Danny agreed on one condition. No scripts, no fake drama. What you see is what you get. Counting Cars premiered in August 2012. The first episode featured a 1970 Plymouth Superbird, a winged NASCAR homologation beast so rare that Danny flew to Nebraska to haggle with a farmer who didn't want to sell. The negotiation took 3 hours. Danny walked away with the car and a handshake. The episode ended with the Superbird's first start in 20 years, smoke pouring from the exhaust, and Danny's grin wide enough to crack his face. America was hooked. 6 episodes became 9 seasons. The show's peak came in season 6. A complete restoration of a 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 429, one of only 859 ever built. The engine alone cost $40,000. The paint took 3 tries. The episode aired in March 2017 and drew 2.8 million viewers, the highest rating in the show's history. Danny celebrated by playing a 3-hour set at Vamped, then went back to the shop the next morning and started all over again. But behind the glory, the engine was starting to knock. While millions of viewers watched Danny haggle over rusted fenders and argue about skull paint, a much quieter crime was happening inside Count's Customs. Danny didn't notice at first. Why would he? The shop was busy. The show was successful. But it wasn't until an outside accountant reviewed the books in late 2018 that the first red flag appeared. The Count, who had stared down stubborn farmers and screaming mechanics, sat in silence as the numbers were laid out in front of him. He didn't yell. He didn't smash anything. He just listened. Then he asked one question. Who? It was Joseph Frontiera. Joseph never appeared on a single episode of Counting Cars. He was the bookkeeper, the man Danny trusted to pay the bills, track the expenses, and keep the financial engine running while the Count played rockstar on screen. He was, by all appearances, boring, and that was exactly what made him dangerous. For years, Joseph handled the money with no oversight. He created fake vendors, paid them from Count's Customs accounts, then funneled the money back to himself. When no one noticed, he got bolder. 5,000 became 10, 10 became 20. Over time, he siphoned more than $75,000 from the business, money that was supposed to buy parts, pay, painters, and keep the lights on. Danny felt something he had never felt in 40 years of turning wrenches and making deals. He felt stupid. He didn't go to the tabloids. Instead, he did what he always did when something needed fixing. He went to work. He hired a private investigator who tracked every fake transaction and every stolen dollar. It took months, but by the end, he had built a case ironclad enough to sink a battleship. In 2020, just as Counting Cars was airing its final season, Danny took Joseph Frontiera to court. The evidence was overwhelming. Frontiera had no defense. He was found liable for fraud and embezzlement and ordered to pay $41,000 in damages. His name now lives in a public record that will follow him forever. But the damage inside Count's Customs was already done. Danny looked at his crew differently now. He wondered who else might be hiding something. He stopped trusting the way he used to, and when the History Channel quietly declined to renew Counting Cars in 2021, Danny didn't fight for it. He just let it go. But the tabloids weren't done with him, and they had the wrong name. The deepfake appeared on a sleepy Facebook group dedicated to reality TV gossip. At first, only a few people liked and shared it. Nothing about that first hour suggested a wildfire. But within days, a fabricated image of Ryan Evans, Counting Cars' lead painter, in an orange jumpsuit had jumped to YouTube, Reddit, and a dozen tabloid websites that recycled each other's lies. The caption read, "Counting Cars painter embezzled $70,000. Danny Koker covered it up." Ryan Evans had spent over 20 years at Count's Customs. He was the kind of man who never raised his voice or sought the spotlight. All he wanted to do was lay down paint jobs that made grown men cry. He believed in Danny and the crew so much that even when better offers came, he turned them down. And now his reputation was being shredded by people who knew nothing about him. Danny saw all of it from his garage. His lawyers gave him the same advice they had given him for every rumor since the show started. Do not engage. But it was tough. Danny wanted to scream. He wanted to tell the world that the real thief was Joseph Frontiera, a man he had already taken to court and who had already been ordered to pay damages. Instead, he chose silence. And silence only made things worse. A YouTuber with 1 million subscribers made a video titled, "The Rot Inside Counts Customs." The thumbnail showed Ryan's fake mugshot next to Danny's face with a red X over it. The video got millions of views. Even after Danny's lawyer sent a takedown notice, it stayed up. More lies piled on. One website claimed Danny had been arrested for fraud. Another said he was shilling unlicensed CBD products on Fox News. Each one more absurd than the last. The rumors started reaching Count's Vamped, Sponsors got nervous, bands began canceling, the crowd thinned. Danny poured his own money into keeping the lights on. Then in June 2025, he was done. Within 1 week, he closed the bar. The tabloids called him a finished, broken man. But what they didn't know was that the Count's silence wasn't defeat. It was strategy. If you only read the tabloids in the summer of 2025, you would have thought Danny Koker was finished. Another Vegas Icarus, a guy who flew too close to the sun and melted somewhere over the strip. But the headlines never bothered to drive down to Count's Customs and look through the garage doors. Because behind those doors, the same lifts were still creaking under the weight of classic Mustangs and vintage Harleys. And though the cameras were gone, Danny Koker was still there. Every morning, before the sun came up, turning wrenches, with the same grease-stained hands that had been doing it since the late 90s. While the internet was busy burying him, Danny was quietly having something that felt more like the real Danny Koker, a show blending cars, music, and his unfiltered personality. Details are still under wraps, but the conversations are happening. At the same time, he launched a podcast called Count's Culture, where Danny sits down with someone interesting, a fellow car builder, a rock musician, an old friend from the Vegas days, and they just talk. No scripts, no fake drama. Sound familiar? The podcast doesn't have millions of listeners, but it has the right listeners, the kind who stuck with him through the silence and never believed the lies. And the money? Everyone loves to speculate about a celebrity's finances when they fall from grace. But Danny Koker never fell as far as the headlines suggested. His net worth sits at an estimated $15 million. He owns the land under what used to be Count's Vamped, a purchase. He made for over $2 million when the show was at its peak. That is the kind of move a man makes when he is thinking about the long game. So where does that leave Danny Koker today? Still in Las Vegas, still running Count's Customs, still playing piano when the mood strikes, still wearing the bandana and the leather vest, because that is who he is. Not a costume he puts on for cameras. A man who was betrayed by someone he trusted completely, who watched an innocent friend get destroyed by a lie he wasn't allowed to publicly deny, who lost his bar, lost his show, and lost 9 seasons of work to a network that decided his story wasn't worth telling anymore. And yet, he is still there, every morning, before sunrise, because that is what the Count does. He doesn't quit. He doesn't explain himself to people who have already decided what they think. He doesn't perform grief for an audience that wants to watch him fail. He just goes back to the garage, and he gets to work. The tabloids called him finished, but you never count out the Count. Now we want to hear from you. Was Danny Koker's silence a costly mistake, or the smartest move he ever made? And do you think we will see him back on television before the year is over? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more untold stories just like this. 1. Thank you for watching, and remember, the best restorations always start in a garage that nobody's watching.